Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, January 12th, 2024. Time to get things started on, well, I guess now that I have trapped myself on the Muppet Show tonight. I guess there's no other way to follow that up. But time to get things started on today's show because it's time for yet another show. All right. Some memories in that one. All right. And by the way, January 12th, a semi-important date for me, who I have been like some sort of OCD bonkers nut, have been keeping track of the COVID-19 numbers, even as the rest of the world has abandoned and forgotten about the pandemic. But just keeping track, and there's fewer and fewer numbers to keep track of, by the way, not because the disease is going away, but because the desire to track the numbers with respect to the disease is going away. And I think largely politically driven. There are jurisdictions that just say, well, why should we collect numbers that tell people that there are people contracting COVID-19 within our jurisdiction? Why don't we just not tell them? And people can assume it, but why give them any ammunition and give them any numbers to go by? The idea of collecting numbers, of course, was to illustrate that, you're doing your job and keeping the numbers relatively stable, if not going down. But, try telling that to Republican jurisdictions and Democratic jurisdictions alike these days. People have just tired of collecting this data. However, I've kept up with it mostly because, like I said, OCD and I can't stop. But, and the mighty OCD must know something about that. He's, in fact, here tweeting live the kickoff of the show today. Good morning to you. So I'm not just calling you out here on this. I'm having the same problem. I can't stop tracking the numbers, even though the numbers are less and less helpful in terms of, I don't know, there's certainly no predictive value to them, and who knows. But I kept going on the premise that it was actually important to document how reporting has fallen off as well. But in the meantime, the numbers that I do have, I share with people, and collecting the total number of new reported cases, new reported deaths, etc., but just and how it stacks up as a percentage of the population of the jurisdiction that's reporting, etc., etc. But the 12th, January 12th, is an important date because it will be the second anniversary of the Supreme Court decision striking down the vaccine mandates, after which Justice Alito griped that he didn't, essentially said, I don't want to hear people trying to blame any COVID-19 deaths on the court here. We were following the law. It's not our fault. And just whining that he didn't want to be essentially held responsible for any continuing misery or death that might arise from telling people, nah, you don't have to listen to the federal government telling you to go get the COVID-19 shots. Not as a mandate, anyway. That, I guess, probably the decision was handed down on the 11th, and so the 12th I marked down as as day one. How are they doing on that? If someone was to hold Alito's feet to the fire about that, what would they tell him in terms of the numbers of people who have reportedly, and it's just reports, because a lot of people don't bother reporting when they contract COVID, versus the deaths that have happened since then. I marked down kind of where we were at that point and have checked the numbers and done the math afterwards each time. So let's see. I wrote down the numbers for January 12th, 2022. We were at about 60. I mean, it was a whopping number of cases, no doubt. And things have slowed down considerably. There's no doubt about that. That's not an issue. But they haven't stopped. So, that's why I've continued to look at it. And January 12th, 2022, 65 point, let's say, 2 million cases of of COVID-19 had been reported in the United States at that point, and we are in the neighborhood of, what are we, about 110 million cases now? Something like that. And last night's numbers will tell the story. If I can scroll back to where we are, the Alito-related text about this one. We have had since 45.2 million additional reported cases of COVID. Of course, some 15 or 20 people might have had all of those cases. That's possible. But at that point, about 65 million and another 45 million have happened since. And don't worry about it. Nobody needs to get any vaccines. 875,000 people had already died by the time the Supreme Court decided we don't really need to do very much about this. Another 316,000, nearing 317,000 people have reportedly died from COVID since then. So well over 1 million and on our way to 1.5 million. And just wanted you to know that we were still watching that. Sam Alito. Yeah, not that he cares about it. Well, I don't know. Every once in a while he whines about what kind of bad publicity he gets. So we'll keep it up. I just happened to note that today as I saw the date out of the corner of my eye. Yes, so January 12th, and plenty to do, and a Friday, and all day to do it, too. So let's get right to it. 18 different directions we could go in. Maybe a quick news roundup of some items that I just happened to notice were making the rounds today, helping us establish where we are in history. First up, just wanted to note for the record, apparently there's some activity from the White House and President Biden taking further executive action on student debt relief. So that'll make some people happy, I am sure. I happen to just put aside the White House press release on it, which maybe not, I don't know if it's the most informative source of all this stuff, but I just kind of wanted to get on the record that, okay, we've got that in the news. It might sort of explain after introductory text a little bit about exactly what's changing here. But do you want to hear the political introductory text about it as well? The statement from President Biden issued today, and then, like I said, a little bit of political setup. From day one of my administration, everyone loves to do that one, I vowed to fix the student loan system. He vowed to do that even before day one of his administration, I think. But then people were saying, hey, how about that vow? And it took a while. I vowed to fix the student loan system and make sure higher education is a pathway to the middle class. Presuming that you started below that. You don't want to start out as the upper class and find out that college is a pathway to the middle class, but you might, especially if there's no student loan debt relief and your parents made you borrow the money or something like that. Okay, never mind. Anyway, that it should be a pathway to the middle class, not a barrier to opportunity. Already, my administration has canceled student debt, remember this, for 3.6 million Americans through various actions, delivering life-changing relief to students and families, and we created the most affordable student loan repayment plan ever, the SAVE plan. That's an acronym. Don't know what it stands for, but it's good to get around to the word SAVE, certainly. I am proud that my administration is implementing one of the most impactful provisions of the SAVE plan nearly 6 months ahead of schedule. Starting next month, here's the meat of it, I guess. Borrowers enrolled in SAVE who took out less than $12,000 in loans and have been in repayment for 10 years will get their remaining student debt canceled immediately. Is that you? Should be jumping with joy? I don't know. How many of you this might cover, or your kids, or your I don't know, nephews, nieces, cousins, who knows? This action will particularly help community college borrowers, low-income borrowers, and those struggling to repay their loans, and it's part of our ongoing efforts to act as quickly as possible to give more borrowers breathing room so they can get out from under the burden of student loan debt, move on with their lives, and pursue their dreams. It sounds pretty good, and I think I'll probably jump out of the statement at this point. Just wanted to note for the record that that's out there. If it's of interest to you and you haven't heard about it already, I'd be surprised. But it's getting to be that season where it might be wise for the administration to claim its victories and talk about them openly. I think they know that. I think that's what they're doing. At any rate, so one among many stories that I wanted to get to today. And then, let's see, I also have to put on the record, and then I don't know whether we're going to get to the issue and to be able to give it the time it needs. It's a Good Friday thing to cover, but we've made passing mention over the past couple of months now, I guess, in the course of keeping one eye, at least, on the war in Israel with Hamas. And we've made passing mention from time to time that, worries about the conflict going more region-wide. And along with those worries, the mention of the fact that the Yemeni Houthi rebels are injecting themselves into the situation as well and joining in, I guess, efforts to try and drive the war more region-wide. Whereas Hamas, of course, directly involved in the war. We read about Hezbollah in Lebanon thinking about and then finally acting on utilizing the opening and the worry about regional chaos to join in launching missile strikes against Israel, and also occasionally that the Houthis in Yemen were doing the same. Now, I guess we first became aware on the show anyway of the Houthi rebels when they were learning to launch their rockets into Saudi Arabia and even as far as the UAE, and found themselves on the receiving end of payback from those countries. And the Yemeni civil war has been ongoing and brutal and probably confusing to most Americans and therefore out of mind for most Americans. But at any rate, they decided recently, I guess, as long as they're launching missiles and testing the range of those missiles, what if we joined in the strike against Israel as well? Because at bottom, the issue is that the Houthi rebels are Islamist rebels, and therefore not only problematic as rebels inside Yemen, but problematic to the Saudis and UAE, who are usually looking to suppress Islamist movements that they don't secretly finance or control from behind the scenes. So, anyway, they've stepped up their attacks in the region and have now been attacking shipping in the Red Sea, which, in case you're not familiar with Yemen, I guess if a quick look at the map will tell you who they are and where they are, and we'll show you, that's if you can strike out against shipping from land. I don't know what kind of naval forces are at their disposal, if any, besides, I guess, small boats and rafts, and that may be enough to launch attacks anyway. But you can see that they are right up along some very busy shipping routes and can really cause some problems. And they're beginning to do that. And so apparently they've now escalated their attacks to attacking shipping as announced, that was related to commerce with Israel, either inbound or I guess outbound as well, cargo ships on their way to and from Israel. And then, as the temptation no doubt was, pretty much anybody who might be taking their shipping through, say, the Red Sea and around the Arabian Peninsula. And that's causing problems. And now we've got to the point where we have the United States and United Kingdom joining forces and getting ready to use naval forces in the area to strike back and try and suppress some of the fire from the Houthis, which compels us to take a look at the situation, for one thing, and as is often the case, compels some people here in the United States to assume that if the United States and or UK are bombing them, they must be worthy of tremendous sympathy and maybe even political loyalty, even if it doesn't make any sense, and they would want almost nothing to do with Americans at all, particularly leftist Americans. But That's just one of the natural consequences of escalating conflict for the United States. There's, it's always worrisome, and rarely are there overwhelming numbers in favor of getting ourselves involved in, brutal ongoing wars in countries that most Americans have never heard of and can't find on a map. I understand that sentiment, to be sure. But I thought I'd put aside some articles that I saw, sort of, I guess all we can do at this point, at the outset of this inquiry, is to both sides it to some extent. I don't think we'll be both sidesing it to the extent of, you know what's awesome? Firing on commercial shipping in the middle of the Red Sea. That's usually not going to pass muster with us, but more along the lines of, well, how... to what level do you want to escalate the intervention is the question. And Justice has got them on his mind, by the way. That was one of his first check-in comments as the introductory music was playing. And he was, he says the Houthi caucus is a bipartisan anti-American group. Okay, well, let's look into this. Not only, he says, also, just now, have the Houthis fired on U.S. and U.K. naval vessels, they commandeered, i.e. pirated, I guess I would say, a civilian Japanese vessel, the Galaxy Leader, and are still holding the crew. So they're not doing things through the United Nations, is what we're saying here. I think the claim when they did it was that, yes, it's a Japanese vessel, but that it was carrying cargo to or from or in the interest of someone in Israel, if not the Israeli government, almost certainly not the Israeli government, and so therefore, something, no rules, do whatever you want. So, yeah, that's a pretty serious issue. He's in fact attached a Reuters article about it, and because it's an article, and because it's in front of us, and because we started down this path, let's take a look. Maybe we do spend our time there. We've already covered the 14th Amendment pretty well, but there's more. And, of course, Trump had himself a hell of a day in court and is getting set to have another hell of a day pretty soon. So we do want to stay up to date on that as well. Here's the Reuters report, though, by the way, that Justice provided to me. Crew of seized Galaxy Leader. And it's a good thing we learned the name of the ship ahead of time, because that's a confusing headline otherwise. Crew of seized Galaxy Leader allowed modest contact with families, according to the ship owner. Here's the story. The crew of the Galaxy Leader commercial ship seized by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis. That'll also help you get some context here. Last month, the ship was, seized, have been allowed modest contact with their families while various countries push for their release, the vessel's owner said this week. The Bahamas-flagged car carrier. It's a very interesting story, just bringing in global, the whole global trade. Japanese-owned ship carrying cars flagged in the Bahamas, but clearly either bound to or from Israel and in the interest of several other Western countries, being taken over by Yemeni rebels. The Bahamas-flagged car carrier was taken to the port of, oh boy, I don't think I know this port. It's in Houthi-controlled northern Yemen. Hodeida, I'm going to guess, is the name of it. It was enough for me to just check on, I thought, how to pronounce, were we pronouncing Houthi correctly? Seems like we've got that part right anyway. All right, so brought into port in northern Yemen after being boarded at sea on November 19th, actually, so not just last month, but the month before that, by commandos with the group. That would be swashbuckling pirates if it was a movie, but in real life it's just Yemeni commandos. The vessel's crew is made up of nationals from, this is interesting too, Bulgaria, Ukraine, just poor Ukrainians who just can't stay out of the way of trouble, the Philippines, Mexico, and Romania. Galaxy Maritime said the vessel is chartered by Japan's Nippon Yusen. So it's Bahamian flagged. I don't know where Galaxy Maritime is headquartered. Maybe they're also Bahamian. And Japanese chartered with an international crew attacked by Yemenis. This has got a little bit of everybody in here. The safety and welfare of the crew members remains the priority of both the owners and managers of the modest contact that has been allowed with crew members and their families suggests that the seafarers, that's what they are being treated as well as can be expected in the circumstances. I don't know what that really means, but wow, it's just involving every far-flung corner of the world. You should guess that this is the case with shipping, particularly international shipping. They love registering the ships and establishing the companies in very often ignored corners of the world for taxation purposes, I would assume. Or rather, the purpose of avoiding the taxation anyway. So what just came up that made me say that? After the statement, they identify Galaxy Maritime and its headquarters. They are registered, the company registered in the Isle of Man. Wow. So Channel Islands also getting into it, also a notorious offshore tax haven as well. So Bahamian registry, the company is established in the Isle of Man. They suddenly find themselves leased by the Japanese and carrying cars up and down the Red Sea with an international crew. Wow. Like I said, it's got potential to really destabilize large swaths of the world. The 25 crew members being held have no connection whatsoever with the current situation in the region. Any part of it, I'm sure. The owner said nothing can be achieved by their further detention. Except for attention for Yemen, or at least Houthi rebels in Yemen, which may be all they're interested in. Otherwise, we're not talking about them. The United States has blamed the Houthis for a series of attacks in Middle Eastern waters since the war broke out between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas on October 7th. 3 vessels were attacked in the Red Sea area on Sunday. At an assembly session on Monday of the UN Shipping Agency's highest governing body, whatever that might be, they don't bother telling us the name of it, the United States, the Bahamas, and Japan called for the unconditional release of the Galaxy leader and its crew. Japan's delegation told the International Maritime Organization, is that what it is, Assembly, that it strongly condemns those acts which threaten the safety and freedom of navigation in that area. The Bahamas said the various attacks, including the Galaxy leader, were a violation of all the norms relating to innocent passage of ships. Here we have non-state actors, so who do you hold responsible? The Bahamas said, referring, of course, to the Houthis. So, certainly complex and involving people from all over the world. And, I don't know, no immediate settlement idea comes to mind. But, as I was saying, lots of discussion about what to do and how to feel about what's going on, including, for instance, I guess the first social media mention from today that brought it to my attention from Elias Isquith, who we've heard from, I think, from time to time, expressing this sentiment. He says, I know this will get me canceled, but I am willing to sacrifice myself to express bold truths. Wink, wink, ready? The Houthis are bad, and if you support them in public, you're either silly or bad or probably both. Okay, yeah. At this point, yeah, acting as sort of freelancer pirates and interrupting international shipping, we tend to frown on that. Of course, then there are chaos agents and anarchists and just people who are generally sympathetic with, well, either instinctively sympathetic with anybody we happen to be bombing or threatening to bomb at the moment, and understandable. But I think the more serious discourse to which there is more than one side is the question of, all right, well, what are you going to do about it? It doesn't necessarily mean, if the message comes across, don't bomb the Houthis, which is actually the headline of a foreign affairs piece that I have sitting before me. That doesn't necessarily mean, hey, let them have free reign in the Red Sea or anywhere else, or let them take over Yemen, or cheerleading for them, or they're pretty good guys. Just don't bomb them. They're bad guys, but don't bomb them is one message. And then, sentiment on the other side as well. But I don't think I have prepared anywhere hell yeah, let's bomb the hell out of Yemen as a position. But some backgrounders, it might be wise to perhaps skim a little bit of this and maybe assign it for the weekend if you feel like catching up on exactly what's going on. So as I said, over in Foreign Affairs, don't bomb the Houthis. And then, this isn't a do bomb the Houthis article, but just sort of a backgrounder. The Houthis' forgotten war goes global. That's a piece from Elizabeth Kendall, published over at, what is this? Engelsberg Ideas, about which I know nothing, but they sound very idea-ish, and we should perhaps give a look. But yeah, these are long and complicated articles for a long and complicated war, but I thought the headline at least was a good reminder. We've brought the names of the Houthis up before and been sort of puzzled at where they fit in global geopolitics, and I guess now they're fighting for a larger slice of our attention that way by disrupting shipping in the region. So anyway, things to read about it, plus some detailed and weedy things to read about our own problems here in the U.S. Plus, of course, now time to catch up a little bit, perhaps in the next segment, about the wacky happenings in the courtrooms around the country as the former guy, the fascist guy, has to fly from one trial to the next, keeping him off the campaign trail. Not that he ever really loved spending time there either. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, we made it back just in time. The pause button, the mute button had been hijacked by Houthi rebels, but we've secured its release after a while. I don't know. I kind of want to move on, but I kind of also want to give some time to this. And I don't know. Maybe we can make it all the way through. First of all, we should get all these cookie pop-ups out of the way. What about Elizabeth Kendall's rundown on the Houthis' forgotten war going global? It is a good thing to use a Friday for. And at this point in the show, we feel like we've still got forever. So we'll never run out of time. Okay, let's take a look and see what we got. This is an important and emerging story, and it's probably best if we get this on the record before the weekend. The Houthis emerged in Yemen as an Islamist movement in the late 1980s. How many of us heard about the Houthis in the late 1980s? Wow. Following the war in Gaza, their significance has grown as they disrupt trade through the Red Sea with dangerous potential for escalation. I guess while they kept their war on land, people were content to ignore it. But things have now changed. On November 14th, 2023, the military spokesman of Yemen's Houthis, General, all right, best guess at some of these regional Arabic names, Yahya Saraya, that's the general, the spokesperson for the Houthis, released a statement with an image of an Israeli ship on fire, with a vow to, quote, sink your ships. They think they're orcas here. 5 days later, dramatic footage captured on the body cams of Houthi hijackers. Yeah, they got body cams. And that too, I think, has contributed an awful lot to their ability to project what power they have outside of the borders of Yemen so that they can annoy other people, threaten them occasionally with death, and therefore get attention in the international sphere. Cheap technology that's made it possible for them to make these attacks, film them, distribute the footage of it worldwide, build drones, build missiles, etc. Once again, one of the outgrowths of the growth and availability of cheap technology that enhances rough weaponry. Anyway, so 5 days later, dramatic footage captured on the body cams of Houthi hijackers and beamed around the world showed heavily armed insurgents clad in black balaclavas jumping out of a helicopter, they do have helicopters, onto the deck of the Galaxy Leader, a cargo ship affiliated with an Israeli businessman affiliated with. I mean, I have no idea exactly how or what that means, but that was the premise of their attack. If you were wondering why attack the Bahamian registered ship leased by Japanese from the Isle of Man, the Manx ownership, etc., and crewed with this international crew, apparently an affiliation somehow with an Israeli businessman, easily believable, and taking it and over 20 crew members hostage. On December 9th, a further Houthi statement broadened out the threat to ships of any nationality heading to the Zionist entity. You see kind of where they are in Islamism, the Zionist entity. In reality, the threat now also encompasses shipping with no clear link to Israel. To date, well over 100 drones and missiles have been launched at international shipping with links to over 50 countries. Now, you knew what kind of response that was going to generate, of course, and they've gone ahead and done it. The U.S. is no stranger to patrolling the waters around the Arabian Peninsula to protect international shipping from Iranian threats, from other Iranian-backed threats. We've got a long history. That, too, stretches back to the late 80s, reflagging tankers, perhaps you remember. On the other side of the Arabian Peninsula in the Persian Gulf, now we just have gone around the horn here to the Red Sea, the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. And we'll be back in the same exercise shortly. Okay, so where were we with this? Right. To date, over 100 drones and missiles launched at international shipping with links to over 50 countries. That'll happen. There's links to over 50 countries just on this one ship. The impact on global trade is significant. At least 17,000 ships pass through the Red Sea annually, carrying over 10% of global seaborne trade and 20% of global container volumes. You'll recall, of course, up at the head of the Red Sea, the Suez Canal. So you can see why it's such an important passage. You can get from the Red Sea through the canal up into the Mediterranean and to all of Europe and vice versa. The upshot is that insurance premiums have skyrocketed and several of the world's biggest container shipping firms are rerouting around Africa. That's a longer way to go. Longer journeys will, in time, impact supply chains. I'm sure the production staff is groaning in the background. And ultimately drive up prices for consumers. Oh no, not that. Yeah, that'll happen again too. After 9 years of civil war in Yemen, which the international community barely noticed, despite the Houthis having launched over 1,000 missiles and drones at Saudi Arabia, But how are you and I supposed to notice that, except when it shows up in the newspaper and I say, what? Who? Where? Oh my gosh, I should tell people. Anyway, as well as striking targets inside the United Arab Emirates, suddenly the world is watching and wondering, who are the Houthis and what do they want? That's a good question. The Houthis emerged in Yemen's northwest highlands and take their name, oh, thank you, I'm finally going to figure this out, take their name from their former leader, Hussein al-Houthi. He was killed in 2004, and they are currently led by his brother, Abd al-Malik al-Houthi. Okay, not such terribly difficult names. That's a break. Although their tribal roots are strong, they are not a tribe, but a much broader grouping that is at once religious, political, and military. Let's take each one of these elements in turn. This is actually quite informative. I think religion is, of course, central to the formation of Houthi identity politics. The Houthi movement is rooted in Zaidi Islam. Okay, I don't think we know about that one. Zaydism is, and it's Z-A-Y-D-I is in the way there. Spelling it as, I don't know whether that's Zaidi or Zaidi, but I'm going to go with Zaydism, is a branch of Shi'ism, Shia Islam, as we know it, but is a more moderate form. Wow. Oh, good. That's nice. Than the Twelver Shi'ism practiced in Iran and closer in practice to Sunni Islam. So kind of in the middle there. So U.S. moderates. There you go. That's the compromise between Sunni and Shia Islam you've been looking for. Except it doesn't seem to be netting anybody anything in terms of, I don't know what. Anyway, never mind, not our business. Houthi mobilization began in the late 1980s as a revivalist movement seeking to end their religious, political, economic, and cultural marginalization following the toppling of their state, a religious-based imamate, in 1962. The imamate was forcibly replaced by the Yemen Arab Republic, which later became North Yemen. The new state was infused with proselytizing initiatives led by Saudi-backed Wahhabi missionaries seeking to spread their strict Sunni belief system among the predominantly Zaidi population and ultimately to undermine Zaidi religious and political elites. So, a familiar theme, certainly, even if we weren't familiar with the Zaidi religious sect. In response, the Houthi leadership began to nurture a network of believing youth. That's in quotes there. I guess that's the translation of what they were calling their group, the believing youth. That is, I guess, those who dedicated to preserving the Zaidi Islam way of life, and increasingly to adopt the kinds of Shiite symbols common in Iran. The seeds of sectarian tension were sown and would fester as the Houthi insistence on recognition tipped over into conflict. The Yemeni government fought 6 rounds of war against the Houthis from 2004 to 2010, with Saudi Arabia intervening directly against the Houthis in 2010. And I think the leftover remnants of the last round of that war is what caught our attention some years later. But yeah, I think my understanding at the time was that they didn't identify them directly as Shia Muslims, but it made sense given that they had found themselves in conflict with the Saudis, who were such aggressive purveyors of Sunni Islam, I guess you could say, and that they were Iran-backed. But it wasn't clear that that was necessarily, because they didn't outright say that they were Shiite Muslims, it wasn't clear that that was the reason. Iran might just have been doing it just for the hell of it, to destabilize part of the Arabian Peninsula, to annoy the Saudis, to disrupt the operation of, let's say, offshore gas mining fields in the Persian Gulf that lay in between Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Iran. Who knows? Okay, but now I guess a clearer picture for the first time. A separate sect, but not Sunni, and so therefore something the Saudi Wahhabists are going to be aggressive about dealing with, but not exactly Shia either. The Houthis' political positioning is entwined with their religious ideology, and their political arm is known as Ansar Allah, or Partisans of God. Sounds like just the kind of people you want to be rooting for in a U.S. bombing campaign. However, Houthi influence now extends well beyond their traditional religious roots and geographical boundaries. While Zaydis make up around 1/3 of Yemen's population, the Houthis today control territory in which around 2/3 of the population, or 20 million Yemenis, live. Houthis have largely discarded their guns had largely discarded their guns to join the 2011 Arab Spring uprising and take part in the National Dialogue Conference that followed in 2013 and 14. However, the dialogue itself failed to address how Yemen's power, territory, and resources would be shared. I'm not even familiar with the context here of the National Dialogue Conference, but the Houthis, mistrustful of a transition process led by a Southern-born president whom they saw as installed by the international community, parenthetically it says, elections took place, but he was the sole candidate. Well, the Houthis took matters into their own hands. The Houthis took over Yemen's capital of Sana'a in September of 2014 and proceeded to march south. Boy, I just don't know the layout of Yemen. If you don't, maybe you want to follow along with the map as well. In so doing, they managed to win over significant support among Yemenis beyond their traditional power base by framing their power grab as a principled stand against government corruption and ineptitude. They held an insurrection, I guess. And it worked. This marked the beginning of the civil war in Yemen. The war became internationalized in March of 2015 when a Saudi-led coalition attempted to push back the Houthis at the request of the internationally recognized government of ousted President Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi. As is often the case when wars begin, the Saudi-led coalition imagined victory would be swift and the Houthis would be defeated in weeks or perhaps months. It has now lasted more than 9 years. As the war dragged on, Houthi hardliners became politically dominant, and it is hard to assess the extent to which the Houthis held power by consent as opposed to fear. Authoritarian measures, recruitment of child soldiers, the weaponization of food, broad repression, the imprisonment and torture of dissenting voices, attacks on civilian infrastructure, all this became the norm, at least until a fragile truce was established in April of 2022. The truce continues largely to hold despite formally expiring after 6 months. So, are they good guys? Doesn't sound like it. Are there probably people dismissing articles like this as Western elitist propaganda? No doubt. So, I don't know what to tell you about this, but doesn't sound difficult to believe. That's certainly true. One of the most significant but rarely articulated developments in Houthi politics is their increasingly supremacist ideology. Several leadership statements suggest that only direct descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, preferably through the line of his martyred grandson Al-Hussein, if you're wondering about the popularity of the name Hussein, have a legitimate claim to authority. The Houthi ruling family claims, you'll never believe it, to descend directly from Al-Hussein. Hence, it is difficult to see how the Houthis in their current form can exercise democratic and consultative government, either in the areas they control or as part of any future power-sharing structure in Yemen more broadly. That might get in the way, yes. The Houthis' military capability has become increasingly sophisticated during the course of the war. Their arsenal includes attack drones and long-range missiles capable of flying up to 2,000 kilometers, enough to reach the Israeli port city of Eilat, as well as a diverse range of anti-ship missile systems and drone boats, yes, with sufficient capacity to continue to disrupt global shipping in the Red Sea. I think at this point, maybe it would be good for us to have a map open here and take a look at the layout of the region. I mean, I think you probably recall from having seen maps once or twice in your life that Yemen occupies that bottom tip of the Arabian Peninsula to the south of Saudi Arabia, which I'm sure you have a general idea about. The Israeli port that was mentioned, Eilat, is where? I guess I want to take a look at that too. Is it northern, southern? That'll make a difference. And the answer is extreme southern Israel, the very bottom. In fact, the only Red Sea port Israel has got. There's a tiny little opening there in between Egypt on one side and Jordan on the other. And Eilat sits at the very northern tip of the Red Sea. So for the missiles to make it from Yemen to Eilat means, depending on their flight path, either all the way up the entire length of the Red Sea or the entire length of the Red Sea coast of Saudi Arabia, and then probably over the southernmost point of Jordan before impacting in Israel. So again, another way to pull the entire region into the war. Fantastic. Okay, so just keeping myself up to date on that one so that I understand what's going on here a little bit better. The Houthi military capability in the international arena was amply demonstrated prior to the current war in Gaza. The most notable attacks were the large-scale coordinated drone attack on Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq, oil facility in September of 2019, and the strikes on oil trucks and airport infrastructure inside the UAE in January of 2022. That one I remember, which resulted in several casualties. I remember the airport attack, at any rate. I think I might have put that in Saudi Arabia, going purely from memory, but it was UAE. These major attacks were designed to change the calculus of the ongoing civil war in Yemen, in which Saudi Arabia and the UAE were the main players in the anti-Houthi coalition. That strategy worked. By 2023, the Houthis had transformed their standing vis-a-vis their regional foes from that of terrorist enemy, I don't know how transformed they are, into recognized political interlocutor. Well, capable of making interlocutory appeals, apparently, in Saudi initiatives to resolve the Yemen war. This doubtless increased their confidence and ingrained the lesson that violence pays. The Houthis would not be able to operate at this level without arms, training, and intelligence supplied by Iran and Hezbollah, its partner in the so-called axis of resistance. At the start of Yemen's civil war, Iran's influence was present but not paramount. The real military game changer for the Houthis as they swept south was their alliance with former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. 9 years of civil war have, however, greatly extended Iran's reach in Yemen. The war has succeeded in entangling Saudi Arabia in an expensive, complex, and unwinnable war. This has damaged Saudi Arabia financially and reputationally. It has redirected Riyadh's attention away from its northern flank in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and has pushed the Houthis ever closer to Iran. The Houthis should not be considered a direct proxy of Iran, don't make that mistake, as in the model of Hezbollah, but at least not yet. The Houthis are pragmatic. They will do Iran's bidding as long as their interests align with and are served by Iran, as is currently the case. Like Iran, the Houthi slogan calls for the extermination of Israel. The Houthis complete Iran's encirclement of Israel through its axis of resistance. Hamas is positioned to Israel's west in the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah is positioned to Israel's north in Lebanon. Iran-backed Shia militias are positioned to Israel's east in Iraq and to Israel's northeast in Syria. And the Houthis are positioned to Israel's south in Yemen and the Red Sea, though they're not really, they don't actually abut Israel. But now with drones and missiles, they can strike there. I don't know if they really stand to pose as serious a threat as Hezbollah or Hamas or even Iranian-backed movements in Syria, but they exist and it's part of a strategy. Preparations for maritime attacks in the Red Sea were reportedly underway in the weeks immediately preceding the Hamas attacks of October 7th, with the Houthi militarization of islands in the Red Sea and deliveries of weapons and materiel to coastal sites. It is therefore possible that the Houthis are part of a planned incremental escalation across the axis of resistance, calibrated to appear reactive rather than proactive. The Houthis have their own independent reasons for adopting a strategy of attacking Red Sea shipping, and their motives are at once domestic, regional, and international, which is to say there are, I guess, several really good reasons for them to do this really bad thing. Domestically, they can frame themselves as the hero standing up for defenseless Palestinians. This rallies their flagging base, exhausted after nearly a decade of war, and it chimes with a broader public keen to do something to help. The Houthis appear to have replenished their ranks through a recruitment drive deliberately designed to harness Yemeni anger at Israel's actions in Gaza. Another good reason to see if you can temper that, I suppose. New recruits have reportedly been promised that they will be sent to assist Palestinians against Israel, although this seems unlikely given the obvious logistical challenges of moving Yemenis across international borders. It is more likely that these fighters will remain deployed domestically to keep up pressure on Yemen's internationally recognized government in an upcoming political process aimed at finding a power-sharing solution to end the civil war. Regionally, the attacks on shipping, and I wonder if that's the premise of the "Don't Bomb the Houthis" article still sitting in the sidelines here. Regionally, the attacks on shipping, which the Houthis insist target only Israeli-linked vessels, whatever that means. Somebody has a package coming on a boat. Is that enough for them? Enable the Houthis to plug into general horror around the Arab world at Israel's apparently indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza. Houthi actions also increase their leverage in talks with Saudi Arabia, which is extremely keen to extract itself from the Yemen war. With a face-saving exit imminent, Saudi is keen, there's a lot of keen in this. Saudi, and I like that reference to them, is keen to avoid antagonizing the Houthis, particularly now that they have demonstrated their capacity to wreak havoc in the Red Sea and send missiles over Saudi airspace at a time when Saudi wishes to focus on developing its tourism sector and Vision 2030 economic plan. I like the way they refer to what we call Saudi Arabia, just calling it Saudi. Internationally, the Houthi attacks are winning maximum publicity, not only for the plight of Palestinians, but also for themselves. And I do recall there having been an enormous focus of an anti-Saudi drive and partially anti-American drive as well. But I recall that the Yemeni civil war was characterized in the United States as that we needed to pressure the American government to stop sending funding and weaponry to Saudi Arabia and the UAE that they were using in their war in Yemen. And so interestingly now, learning a little bit more about who was fighting in that war in Yemen, I don't think we're able to really genuinely pick a good side in that war. So, maybe the protests were not so far off base after all. I mean, it's never off base to say, maybe we should stop financing mass killings in the Middle East in general. You can't go too far wrong with that, usually. Anyway, where were we here? Yes, right. Despite nearly a decade of war in Yemen, the world barely noticed the Houthis, and the conflict was often referred to as the Forgotten War. Now the Houthis are making international headlines, and as global shipping reroutes and markets are rattled, they are also ensuring that the world at large is made to suffer repercussions from Israel's actions. Well, yes, although they're really also suffering repercussions from Yemen's actions. What seemed like a faraway problem in the Middle East is no longer so remote. But it is interesting that it can, if it blames its actions successfully on Israel, and the atmosphere is certainly right for it. Well, it could certainly cause problems that people begin to believe that their economic and supply chain issues are caused by what's going on in Gaza. And look, pretty much anything in the region is going to ratchet up pressure on the lead issue there. I think that's to be expected. Do the Houthis really seek all-out war with America and Israel? Probably not. That they would probably lose that pretty badly. That's bad news. The Houthis have not been shy about issuing belligerent statements and saber-rattling. They have not yet, however, sunk any vessel or killed any crew. In reality, it makes little sense for the Houthis to risk their hard-won military gains, territory, power, and recognition by provoking America to unleash its might against them. This despite the threat, we will sink your ships. Not yet, they haven't, and probably not in their long-term best interest to do so. This is particularly the case now that they are on the cusp of being recognized as a legitimate political authority in Yemen. On December 23rd, the UN Special Envoy to Yemen, Hans Grundberg, is the guy who, you would expect to land in Yemen and be the special rapporteur there, right? Hans Grundberg, I don't know, announced that Yemen's warring parties had committed to measures that would usher in a roadmap for a political process and withdraw all of the foreign forces from Yemen. This has the potential to smooth the way for the Houthis to formalize at least some of their war gains, power, territory, coastline, and resources. This is an unpalatable prospect for Yemen's internationally recognized government and for other power blocs, chief among them the Southern Transitional Council. Who's that? I don't know. Let's see if we can find out in the next couple seconds here. Yet, Saudi and international pressure is currently tuned toward handing the Houthis compromises and concessions in return for the promise of peace. However unreliable such undertakings have proven in the past, the Houthis must be aware that this could very quickly change if they were to spark all-out war in the Red Sea. Well, I feel like we're learning. I feel like I'm compelled to continue. There's still quite a bit more, but what better way to educate yourself on a Friday? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're going to continue on because this has it continues to develop into a bigger domestic politics story for us as well. So we got to kind of know more of the background. We'll understand things that much better, I think, or that much worse. We'll be able to say, I understand things so much that I have no understanding of what's going on there, and so I can therefore say definitively something. You're a bad person. Domestically, you'll find out who your allies are pretty quickly. Although, again, this too sometimes horseshoes around. And, just be careful who you associate yourself with is all I can say. But that's always good advice, I think. All right. So, continuing on with this article here, the Houthis, therefore, look set, to continue steering a course of maximum disruption in the Red Sea, a strategy that has thus far proven highly effective for them, but avoid undertaking lethal operations that could provoke massive military reprisals and risk quashing their newfound political standing. I think it's too late for avoiding military reprisals, but they can possibly keep them less than massive, I guess, is what's still in the offing. There are few viable courses of action remaining for America and its allies. Coercive measures, such as imposing sanctions, have proven ineffective. Restrictive measures, such as curbing the flow of funds to the Houthis, have proven insufficient. Diplomatic efforts are a non-starter owing to the lack of leverage over the Houthis, albeit Oman, the country of Oman, has used its trademark neutrality to attempt to prevent an even worse conflagration. of some interest, and I'm trying to think back about whether we heard anything about the Omanis having tried to intervene in the past. I think that might be new to me. Measures to strengthen Red Sea security have also been tried. On December 18th, the United States announced Operation Prosperity Guardian. Gosh, the names of their operations are always a disaster, but I don't know why you have to call it anything, but I guess that's the mode they work in. And Prosperity Guardian. All right, I get the point. There was I don't know, this goes back a while. They've been, naming stupid things, giving stupid names to operations for a long time. But there was a time, as I recall, in like the, late 80s and early 90s, as we had operations all the time across the region, that they were claiming, the Pentagon would claim that there was no particular protocol to the naming, that they weren't naming operations necessarily with any intention of conveying a message about what the operation was aimed at or why we were doing it, even though it seemed like they absolutely were. Like, I'm thinking to the first Gulf War. And so late 80s, early 90s, when they were like, Operation Desert Shield. Well, of course, you're calling it Operation Desert Shield. The claim is that we're putting troops in northern Saudi Arabia and southern Kuwait in an effort to stop Iraq's advance through the Gulf states, the smaller Gulf states, and shield those people in, those countries anyway, those governments in the desert from the advance of the Iraqis, right? And I have this distinct memory of the Pentagon spokespeople saying, it's just coincidence. The names don't mean anything in particular. They're just sort of shorthand and sometimes just nonsense words, and they don't have anything to do with anything. And sometimes they don't appear to. But you have to believe that whatever's on the minds of the Pentagon brass when they come up with their operation names, they have to be related to these things. It's just too coincidental in like 10, 15, 25 different operations that they all do. So let's see. And then Desert Shield turns to Desert Storm. Well, gee whiz, what's that supposed to mean? What's the storm? Oh, nothing. It's the war. It's the offensive phase of the war. What do you think it is? I don't know. What else is there? There's Operation... Oh, I don't remember. But we have all sorts of horrible names for these things. And so Operation, what did they call this one? Prosperity Guardian. Well, duh. That's guarding the shipping in the Red Sea. Prosperity, international trade, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little on the nose for that, but okay. I wonder whether they still make that claim that there's no relationship between the naming of these operations and any political goals, but okay. Just a little aside there. Does anybody else remember that, or am I making that up? That's something to have the other research associates at KITM headquarters look up, although, yeah, that's probably not showing up that easily on Google. Anyway, let's get back to it here. Right, there are few viable courses for America and its allies, but we'll be trying Operation Prosperity Guardian to establish a multinational maritime force focused on Red Sea security. And there's no way to do anything on the oceans these days that doesn't involve multinational efforts. It, took its first lethal action against the Houthis on December 31st, when U.S. Navy helicopters sank 3 Houthi boats after they tried to board a Maersk container ship, firing on both the ship and the U.S. helicopters. So they came armed and prepared at least to attempt, if not just the boarding of this container ship, to fight off U.S. forces protecting the ship. And I guess that didn't go that well. Yet several countries have revealed their reluctance to join the force. Moreover, given that the U.S. has already established such a force in the region over 18 months prior to the Red Sea attacks, its effectiveness cannot be guaranteed. So, why aren't international partners joining? Well, why take fire from Houthi rebels? And also, given that the United States has been there since forever, and has not been able to guarantee that it can protect international shipping necessarily. Why bother? I don't know if that's such a great answer. I mean, the U.S. can't be everywhere in the Red Sea, and I guess when escorting this Maersk ship, it seemed like pretty effective protection, but okay, I can see the argument, even if it's not a great one. This leaves little beyond more aggressive military action. If the Houthis overstep red lines, as they did on December 31st, then the United States has shown that it will act. Even without further hijacking attempts and direct fire, however, it is unclear that the U.S. and allies can tolerate indefinitely the sustained disruption of global trade under a barrage of Houthi drones and missiles. While Western powers are naturally keen, again, to avoid becoming embroiled in another Middle East war, highly targeted strikes against Houthi military installations and launch sites cannot be ruled out. I guess not. Highly targeted. Never really seems to do the trick, but it makes for good footage, I suppose. Would this work? On the surface, the Houthis appear no match for the highly professional, state-of-the-art military of the U.S., the world's biggest spender on defense, but the Houthis should not be underestimated. See Afghanistan, I suppose, twice at this point. They demonstrate a high tolerance for casualties. They exhibit a striking indifference to the discomfort and misery their actions visit on their own population. After 2 decades of on-off conflict, they view war as a way of life, not a last resort. They enjoy a high degree of confidence, having spent the past 9 years fending off Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, 2 of the region's most highly invested militaries. They feel they have won the civil war, having extracted major concessions from Saudi Arabia and transformed their standing from that of terrorists to political interlocutors. They seem to like that word as much. They're very keen on the word interlocutors as well. But yeah, that's the tipping point where you turn from rebels to, if not internationally recognized government, then somebody who gets to come to the negotiating table to decide who's going to govern going forward. They do not fear the U.S., having watched and celebrated the ignominious retreat of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. Oh, come on. And above all, they believe fervently that God is on their side. I guess that's just inherent to what they do. Even if logic dictates that both sides would rather avoid war, you always get what everybody wants to avoid anyway. We learned that talking with Joan the other day. There is a real risk that miscalculation, emotion, or accident could set off a chain of events that sees the Red Sea region spiral into all-out conflict. That's always something to watch out for out there. All right. As an interlude in between, perhaps, articles on the situation in Yemen, I add this note observed just recently being reposted over at Twitter, which I still occasionally monitor, mostly to see whether anybody's trying to communicate with me over it by direct message or using the KITM hashtag. And it's getting about time for me to just turn it off entirely. Very little traffic comes in that way for good reason. But I note that Josh Marshall is still there and still engaging with the community there for whatever reasons he might have in his head. But this time it's worth something. He points out this entry from Manu Raju, who is also still active there. We'll start with Manu Raju's observation. Biden is facing pushback on the left and the right, by the way, in his reaction to what's going on in Yemen and in the Red Sea. On the left, several progressives, Congress people, Khanna, Bush, and Tlaib, saying that he needed to come to Congress first before ordering strikes in Yemen. Some on the right agree, mostly probably as provocateurs, Matt Gaetz and Tom Massey. But Speaker Johnson, so long as he is the speaker anyway, sides with Biden and calls the strikes long overdue. Johnson saying, "We must hope these operations indicate a true shift in the Biden administration's approach to Iran and its proxies that are engaging in such evil and wreaking such havoc." Okay, so we see battle lines about the battle being drawn. Josh Marshall's observation on it being, whatever one might think in the abstract, anyone who makes this claim that the president should have or must go to Congress before making such a strike would have to explain why presidents of both parties in the past have launched attacks like this countless times over decades and centuries, in fact, and they have never gotten prior congressional authorization for it. I mean, that's the de facto situation. They're going to be stuck complaining about that from the margins. But a good observation. But like I said, it's got domestic repercussions, this whole chapter here. Now, as I mentioned, there is in Foreign Affairs a piece under the title, Don't Bomb the Houthis. It might be interesting to get this angle of approach to the situation, which and see where it's coming from and where it goes beyond don't bomb. Well, let's see. Alexandra Stark is the author, about whom I know nothing, but it's in Foreign Affairs magazine, so of some interest there. Careful diplomacy, the subheader claims, can stop the attacks in the Red Sea. Well, we'll see. The conflict between the United States and the Houthis in the Red Sea is steadily escalating. On December 31st, you know the story. Houthi small boats attempted to attack a commercial vessel. Now you know the story. It's old hat for you now. After U.S. naval helicopters responded to the attack, the Houthis, you know who they are, fired on them. U.S. forces returned fire, sinking 3 Houthi boats and killing 10 crew members. Then, on January 9th, the Houthis launched one of their largest attacks in the Red Sea to date, including 18 drones, 2 anti-ship cruise missiles, and 1 anti-ship ballistic missile, which were intercepted by U.S. and British forces. Anti-ship cruise missiles, going back a long way in the region. That was the primary threat. Like I said, back in the 80s when we were reflagging Kuwaiti tankers in the Persian Gulf, coming under attack from Iranian missile batteries at the Straits of Hormuz. How much of this do I remember offhand? A lot. Crazy. Anyway, this engagement well, at least just little factoids I remember. The real down and dirty, weedy material behind the situation, not so much. Rarely actually discussed in the U.S. press. This engagement, though, represented just the latest in a series of attacks in the Red Sea. I guess we can kind of skip over this, but since mid-November, Houthis have launched more than 20 attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Again, strategically critical strait, transited by 15% of global trade, characterizing their attacks as a response to the Israel-Hamas war. They've also fired missiles and drones towards southern Israel. The Red Sea attacks have forced some shipping companies to temporarily suspend sailing through the Suez Canal, routing instead around the Horn of Africa, a change that adds about 10 days to their journey, and was the whole point of building the Suez Canal, by the way, but okay. The attacks have not yet led to a significant disruption in global trade, but over the long term, rising shipping costs that they provoke are likely to increase oil prices and the cost of consumer goods worldwide. And you can't have that crap happening, I guess. In response, the United States has mobilized international partners, launching in mid-December a multinational initiative aimed at protecting commercial vessels in the Red Sea. And on January 3rd, these partners issued a joint statement that U.S. officials indicated should serve as a final warning to the Houthis before Washington took more drastic action. U.S. officials are now considering military attacks on Houthi targets, and I guess now they've executed them. Because the Houthi attacks could have serious consequences for global commerce, and again, you can't have that. I mean, well, it's better, I guess. It makes more sense to Americans when you're talking about, well, attacks on ships. I mean, attacks, that we should be worried about, right? We should. I mean, people on the boat are worried about it, right? But yeah, I guess it's interesting to see it underlying foreign policy in the end by being, well, you know, prices could go up, so we should kill people. Well, okay, I see what you mean. I don't think that's where I would have laid the emphasis, but okay. Anyway, but instead of retaliatory strikes, the U.S. should favor a diplomatic approach. After all, I guess if you can prevent prices from rising that way, why not do that? Costs less than attack helicopters. The Houthis may be recent entrants into the international newspaper headlines, but they have been challenging the United States and its Gulf partners for 2 decades. And the use of force against the Houthis in the past, whether by former President Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime or by a Saudi-led effort to reinstate the government the Houthis overturned in the mid-2010s, has merely allowed the group to refine its military capabilities and portray itself as a heroic resistance movement, bolstering its legitimacy at home, I would say probably also abroad, among those who find themselves sympathetic to heroic resistance movements, whether they are either of those things or not. Indeed, the group needed a boost. It faced growing domestic resistance before October 7th. Now, however, its response to Israel's operations in Gaza appears to have won support in Yemen and across the region. Retaliatory strikes would also increase the likelihood that the Israel-Hamas war will expand across the region and that the civil war in Yemen will resume. Over the past year and a half, a UN-negotiated truce kept serious conflict in Yemen at bay, but direct U.S. strikes on Houthi targets could reignite internal warfare. The United States has few good options to respond to Houthi attacks, but a diplomatic push for sustainable peace in the war in Yemen, while continuing efforts to deter Houthi attacks alongside international partners, is the least bad of them. Okay, it's a thought. Next up, blast resistance is the name of this section. The Houthi movement began in the 1990s, a little later than we heard earlier, when a group then calling itself Ansar Allah, this time translated as supporters of God, slightly different, began to resist Saudi proselytizing of Wahhabism and to assert Zaidi identity and religious practice across Yemen, this time spelling it Z-A-I-D-I instead of Z-A-Y. Does that help us with the pronunciation at all? Zaid, maybe? Zaidism is a variant of Shiism, local to northern Yemen and parts of southern Saudi Arabia. Oh, that would be interesting too. I mean, it should have been obvious, I guess, given the map. Of course, why would religion stop at the border? But that might be of interest to the Saudis too. Like, we need to suppress southern Saudi Zaidism because it's Saudi. And we only want our kind of Islam in Saudi Arabia. Oh boy. There are important doctrinal differences between mainstream Shiism and Zaidi Islam. Mainstream Shiites recognize 12 imams, the 12ers, right? 12 imams, for instance, while Zaidis recognize only 5. So duh, right? I don't know. I mean, it means nothing much to me, but yeah. You're not going to be able to fit it in every article, right? Yeah, I mean, you could spend the whole week reading about it, if you like, and I might. But as the movement came to oppose the corruption endemic in Saleh's regime and his partnership with the United States in the global war on terror, oh, I see. Okay, it gained Yemeni supporters beyond the Zaidi community. Media accounts sometimes portray Yemen's long-running civil conflict as sectarian strife between Sunnis and Shiites. And in fact, throughout the early years of the 21st century, notes Mariki Brandt, an anthropologist who has studied the Houthis extensively, the Ansar Allah movement expanded to become a catalyst with the potential to unite all those in northern Yemen who felt economically neglected, politically ostracized, and religiously marginalized. In response to the movement's rising prominence, beginning in 2004, Saleh's government launched 6 brutal rounds of fighting, killing the group's charismatic leader, Hussein Badreddin al-Houthi. We got a new name thrown into the middle of that one. But these military efforts failed to root out the movement. Instead, Ansar Allah gained new adherents and enshrined its founders' family members as its leaders. Family members, as getting kind of dangerous, but probably a good lesson in terms of, everything else that's going on all over the world, really. If we just root out the leaders, then we'll get rid of it. Oh, wait, we killed one of them and now there's more of them and there's nothing we can do. Oh, well, that might happen with Hamas too. When the Arab Spring came to Yemen in 2011, Saleh was eventually forced to step down, yielding to his vice president. Of course, what else would the Constitution require, right? The vice president, though, is Abd Rabu Mansour Hadi. But the country's democratic consolidation faltered when the National Dialogue Conference, again, a 2013 and 14 process meant to negotiate a transition to democracy, fell apart. Dang, I can't believe we lost. Recognizing a power vacuum, the Houthis took over Yemen's capital of Sana'a in September of 2014 and then attempted to extend their influence south, seizing control of most of the country. The Houthis' 2014 rise provoked alarm in neighboring countries, most notably Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Around that time, the Houthis began to receive support from Iran and their proxy Hezbollah, adversaries to the Saudis and Emiratis. In 2015, a coalition led by those two countries and supported by the US, the UK, and France intervened militarily, launching airstrikes to support other military organizations that nominally backed Hadi's government. We don't even get names on those. But instead of restoring peace, the airstrikes helped aggravate a war that resulted in what the United Nations has called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Wow. Now, I guess, surpassed by the newest worst humanitarian crisis in the world in the same region and related to this one. Between 2015 and 2022, airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition, backed by U.S. intelligence sharing, aerial refueling, and aircraft maintenance, killed an estimated 9,000 Yemeni civilians. 4.5 million Yemenis are displaced, and more than 21 million, or two-thirds of Yemen's population, remain in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. I guess you got to keep that in mind now, too. Growth opportunity, the next section here, as the Houthis solidified their control over much of northern Yemen. They began to seek more visibility in the regional stage. Their slickly produced Beirut-based media channel, Al Masira, I hope I've got that right, produces content in both Arabic and English to share their perspective with a broader audience. Houthi traditional poems set to music and video and widely shared on social media declare Houthi opposition to Israel and the United States. To understand the Houthis' goal, it's worth taking seriously what they themselves say they want. Okay. Since about 2003, the Houthis' Sarka, their motto, usually printed in green and red, echoes the slogan of revolutionary Iran and proclaims Houthi values and aims in no uncertain terms. Ready for what they are? God is great, death to America, death to Israel, a curse on the Jews, victory to Islam. All right, it's hard to get along with. In their public statements, Houthi leaders have repeatedly framed their current attacks as a response to Israeli operations in Gaza. Their intent, they say, is to pressure Israel to de-escalate its war against Hamas. And I'm sure that is their intent. But, it also doesn't help that their motto is death to Israel and a curse on the Jews. Like, okay, suppose we de-escalate the war in Hamas, the Israelis might say. Are we out of the death thing then? No? Oh, okay. So maybe we don't take you seriously. But what if the answer was yes? The current Israeli government probably, we also still don't take you seriously. Okay. So how do you negotiate that? I don't know, but that's what they're arguing for here. But this rhetorical posturing has also allowed the Houthis to build legitimacy in Yemen. That's what passes for legitimacy, and across the Middle East, diverting attention from their failures at home, where their popularity has eroded in recent years. They have been unable to deliver economic growth to the poorest country in the Middle East and North Africa. The Houthis are also brutally repressive, torturing and executing journalists. That's not good. Arresting and detaining peaceful protesters, also bad, and restricting the rights of women and girls, bad as well and common all across the region. Many Yemenis increasingly see the Houthis as driven by a desire to establish a totalitarian religious state that protects Zaidi elites' power. Oh my, they've become elites now. Well, congratulations to you. In September of 2023, protests against the Houthis for failing to pay public sector salaries were followed by arrests, but the Houthi leadership recognized it had a problem. In September of 2023, they announced that they were preparing a radical change to their government to address corruption and economic problems before the Israel-Hamas war gave them a new opportunity to gain legitimacy. A Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey research poll indicated in late November and early December of 2023 found that, or I guess conducted then, indicated that residents of Gaza and the West Bank ranked Yemen's response to the Israel-Hamas war as the most satisfying among regional actors. I know that sounds like a trivialization of the whole thing to be polling about things that way, but the Houthis have trumpeted Yemeni pro-Palestine demonstrations as evidence of their support for the Palestinian people. Regionally, the Houthis have used their attacks in the Red Sea and on Israel to demonstrate their importance to Iran's axis of resistance. You know all about that. The partnership between Iran and the Houthis deepened substantially over the course of Yemen's civil war. Iran values the Houthis because they allow Tehran to act more widely while maintaining a plausible deniability. The Houthis, for instance, claimed responsibility for the drone attack in the Saudi oil facilities and, of course, the airports in the UAE as well. The Houthis are also launching an escalating series of strikes facilitated by the Islamic Guard.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One last segment before heading out for the weekend. And we could fill it all the way through with the war in Yemen and everything that it entails, I guess, in the war in the entire region. There are a few more interesting points that we've got to make, but we got to move on from this. I thought we got a pretty good background out of this. There's yet more, and of course there are many more articles as well. But as I was trailing off into break here, I was trying to cram in one more sentence here. But what got garbled in all of this was, let's see, the April 2022, the truce that was holding out at that point in Yemen, the Houthis. Until that truce, the Houthis were also launching an escalating series of strikes, as I was saying, and kind of got cut off, facilitated by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps / Quds Force on territory within Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Oh, okay. I'm getting a note here from Scott that we are, I guess, temporarily, perhaps, had our transmission disrupted. We're off the air, but well, hey, what can we do? We got to record and put it out in podcast form. I'm sure that it's possible that a blip knocked us off the air. Maybe we're back on. Everything looks like it's okay from my end, but all right. Well, for those of you who wish you were listening, we'll read a little bit more from this article. The Quds Force has helped the Houthis build stockpiles of sophisticated weapons, including unmanned aerial vehicles and missiles. Since approximately 2016, Iran has helped the Houthis learn to assemble their own weapons using parts from abroad, outrunning the international community's efforts to prevent the smuggling of weapons into Yemen, which is a direct parallel, really, to the development of missile capability for Hamas in Gaza. That's exactly how it went and exactly how people tried to prevent it and exactly how it failed. The fact that the Houthis are now able to launch missiles directed at Israel and commercial vessels, while thus far avoiding significant retaliation, is undoubtedly further demonstrating the group's strategic value to Iran. Tehran has offered support to the Houthi attacks, sharing intelligence to assist attacks in the Red Sea and moving its own warships into these waters. And then a final segment called Strike Out. International actors must respond to the Houthis' attacks, both to preserve the Red Sea shipping route and to prevent further regional escalation, but the United States is confronted by an array of bad and worse options for how to do so. Some politicians and analysts have argued that the best way to counter Houthi aggression is with military escalation designed to restore deterrence. This perspective sees the United States' eventual decision in 2021 to push for peace negotiations in Yemen as the failed policy of appeasement. But proponents of airstrikes against the Houthis cannot articulate what should happen afterward. It's hard to see how airstrikes would deter Houthi attacks now when they have failed to do so over the past decade. Seems like a point. Airstrikes against Houthi targets might marginally erode the Houthis' ability to launch missiles and drones, but it will be much harder to effectively target and eradicate the Houthis' small, cheap, manned and unmanned boats. Likewise, designating the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, as the Trump administration did briefly in 2020, would likely have little effect. Their leaders have long been under U.S. sanctions, and they would no doubt simply use the designation as further proof that they can get a rise out of their powerful adversaries. But the FTO designation would certainly make the delivery of humanitarian aid to Yemen more difficult. An approach that combines diplomacy with deterrence is the least bad way for the U.S. to deal with the intractable problem in the near term. There is little international appetite for military response. Even Saudi Arabia, which led the 2015 military intervention against the Houthis, is now cautioning the United States to act with restraint. Washington cannot count on public support from Gulf partners. Although some of the commercial ships the Houthis have targeted have no apparent links to Israel, the fact that they have repeatedly called their attacks an effort to support Palestinians limits the degree to which Arab states can respond to Houthi aggression, even if they were inclined to get involved. Public opinion in Saudi Arabia, for instance, has turned even further against establishing diplomatic ties with Israel. Gulf states have little incentive to risk the wrath of their publics. Aside from Bahrain, the Arab states have been reluctant to publicly associate themselves with the multinational operation that the Pentagon announced in mid-December, and still, that operation is a useful first step to demonstrate international opposition to Houthi aggression and to intercept and deter attacks. The U.S. must also continue to support the UN's efforts to negotiate a sustainable peace in Yemen. The 2022 truce agreement is held, more or less, and the parties are close to a deal that would make the ceasefire permanent and launch talks about the long-term future of Yemen's governance. To deal with the threat posed by the Houthis, ultimately the U.S. must push for an end to the war between Israel and Hamas, as well as to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general. Oh, is that all? Like it or not, the Houthis have linked their aggression to Israel's operations in Gaza and have won domestic and regional support for doing so. Finding a sustainable long-term approach to both conflicts will be critical to de-escalating tensions across the region and getting the Houthis to call off their attacks on commercial vessels. Maybe. Such attacks would have limited utility in the absence of these conflicts. Well, true, but that doesn't necessarily mean they won't work just domestically, and we might see them continue. These measures cannot fully address the threat that the Houthis pose to U.S. interests and to stability in the region more broadly, but they remain the best among bad options. And the United States has only bad options because of its failed approaches to Yemen over the past 20 years. Washington must not repeat its mistakes, but I bet they will, because it's the least bad option, maybe. Decades of experience have shown by now that military efforts to dislodge the Houthis, is that what they're aimed at, are unlikely to be effective. Instead, they may merely further devastate the lives of already struggling people of Yemen, which, again, another parallel problem to Gaza. The people launching the strikes and who need pushback don't care what happens to the population around them. So, not great, to be sure. Alexander Stark, by the way, identified at the bottom of the piece as an associate policy researcher at the Rand Corporation and author of the forthcoming book, The Yemen Model. Probably a book you should pick up and read if you're interested in getting further into the weeds. Okay, definitely time to shift our focus. And also at this point, you'll know immediately. Well, I should identify immediately who we're going to transition to. Rosalind McGregor has another piece for us here, datelined from Michigan, in fact, Ottawa County. More about Ottawa Impact, but let me premise it this way: it is a shift. It's completely different area, completely different focus, but interesting. As I think about the content of her segment, which you'll hear in just a second. I guess let's make the transition, but keep this in mind. Like if you're saying, the intractable sectarian violence in Yemen and elsewhere, and the splits between these groups, and Zaidi Islam versus Sunni Islam versus the, still third branch of Shia Islam. How crazy is this? And that they're splitting hairs and they find themselves at each other's throats over these differences. Why can't they be more like us here in the United States, where we don't have this sort of sectarian conflict all the time? Rosalind, why don't you tell us what's going on, which is actually, I think, good news, but why don't you tell us what's going on in Ottawa County now?
Good morning, David. Today's article is again about West Michigan and Ottawa Impact, but with a twist. Thanks to Fox 17, the local TV station, we have this article titled Deeply Religious and Divided, Ottawa Impact and the Christians in Their County. The article starts out, public comment in open meetings held by the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners often returns to a firm foundation, faith. Quote, if God is for us, who can be against us, unquote, said a resident referencing the book of Romans during a commissioners' meeting last January.
Sounds
the
familiar.
Comment, and others like it, had its critics, though. Quote, I like your Jesus, I do not like your Christians, said another, recalling Gandhi. They are so unlike your Jesus. A devout collection of farming and lakeshore communities, nearly half the people who live in bright red Ottawa County ascribe to a religion, 44%, according to data from the U.S. Religion Census in 2020. When Ottawa Impact rose to power, deeply held convictions for some churchgoers were realized as problematic politics for others. Marked by its swift takeover of the county commission, the Conservative Political Action Committee stirred up differences in the traditionally red county, separating not only Republican from Democrat, but Christian from Christian. Last January, Reverend Bart Spencer opened the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners meeting with a prayer. Quote, I'm proud of you folks, quote, said Spencer, standing in front of the packed room. Quote, let's go to the Lord now. Ottawa County has been the signal county. We may be a bit biased, Father, but the signal county of this state, unquote, Spencer said. The pastor of Lighthouse Baptist Church in Holland, Spencer made a name for himself during the pandemic, telling his congregants to catch COVID and, quote, get over with it. What I preach from up here, I'm going to preach it, he said in an interview with Fox 17, repeatedly mentioning that he's, quote, not mad, unquote, at those who disagree with him. Quote, there has to be an avant-garde somewhere in the growing secular culture that's moving further and further away from Christianity, Spencer said. The combination of faith and conservative politics that Spencer, a self-described born-again Christian, takes to the pulpit, he similarly sees in Ottawa Impact, with a Soli Deo Gloria sign-off, meaning Latin for glory to God alone. Ottawa Impact endorsed commissioners sign a, quote, contract with Ottawa, unquote, which references America's Judeo-Christian heritage and calls the county, quote, an exceptional nation blessed by God, unquote. Separately, the Ottawa GOP passed a resolution declaring 2023 to be the year of the Bible, recognizing a, quote, national need to study and apply the teachings of the Holy Scriptures, unquote. For Dr. Kristen Demez, a history professor at Calvin University, Ottawa Impact's style of politics is typical of Christian nationalism. Quote, very generally, it means that America was founded as a Christian nation and it should be defended as such, said Professor Demez, connecting the contract with Ottawa to Christian nationalist ideology. Beyond a broad definition, though, she says there's difficulty in diagnosing it. While God and country patriots may be harmless, but Christo-fascists pose a threat to democracy, both can be considered forms of Christian nationalism, she says. Dumez said those who ascribe to Christian nationalism can also cause religious infighting in a way that's incredibly disruptive to our civil society. On its website, Ottawa Impact calls accusations of Christian nationalism, quote, simply the latest sleight of terms and defamation of convenience, unquote, and a, quote, national strategy, unquote, applied to, quote, a stronghold of conservative thought. Am I a Christian nationalist? By definition, yes, Spencer said. I believe everybody ought to be a Christian, and I believe America ought to come first. In late September, people of faith again filled the Ottawa County boardroom, pleading with commissioners not to cut a food program from the health department's budget. Quote, what would Jesus have done? He told us to feed the poor, unquote, said one woman. Quote, you state your purposes to align with the Word of God, yet your actions betray this every single time, said another resident. For Reverend Gordon Wiersma, a desire to see affordable housing and diversity led him further into the political realm. Quote, we talk about doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God, he said. The pastor at Hope Church in Holland, Wiersma joined the Ottawa Coalition of Unifying Christians in response to Ottawa Impact. Quote, we felt that it was very important that there be a different voice in Ottawa County that expressed a different Christian perspective, Wiersma said. In total, 39 pastors and 455 people have signed on with the group, which doesn't endorse political candidates, but instead supports policies that, quote, benefit all of our neighbors, unquote. On its website, the coalition is also specifically condemns Ottawa Impact's rhetoric, quote, we reject the notion that our identity as a nation is solely Christian or privileged by God above others, unquote. Wiersma said this really has been a wake-up call for a number of churches. We do need to be more intentionally involved, unquote. Professor Dumez said, quote, local politics were all about getting the road paved, building parks, she said. With this culture wars framing, we've seen that really change. I wish more people understood that there is so much space within a democratic system to live your values, unquote. Back to you, David.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Rosalind. That is kind of fascinating, and it does make for an interesting transition back to domestic politics. I guess if the shoe were on the other foot somehow, or the world was upside down and had developed upside down and backwards from the way it has, and the power was elsewhere, you might wonder, oh, okay, so now sits the Houthi government in Yemen, international actor patrolling the St. Lawrence Seaway and the eastern seaboard, making sure that shipping around the United States remains free and unfettered, and seeing this regional conflict in the backwaters here, Ottawa County, and saying, well, now putting to itself, which Christian faction do we bomb and which Christian faction do we back? And should we back either of them? Or are they both just as bad? I don't know. You might think they would say, well, obviously we want to fight against the Ottawa Impact people and boost what was the name of the coalition that was put together that was actually saying, oh no, actually being Christian, means, to the extent it means intervening in politics at all, backing policies to promote the preaching of Jesus and feeding the poor and taking care of a diverse community. We would prefer that one, right? On the other hand, they might say, well, regional stability demands that we stand behind the Ottawa Impact Coalition because they currently have a firm grip on the governance of that area, and they might be more in alignment with the person who might be the next president of the United States. And although he's an enemy, we understand this enemy, and he will likely ignore the conflict in Yemen as unimportant to him. But on the other hand, he may declare us enemies. But on the other hand, that might be good for us domestically. And I guess then that leads to the nutty thinking of Netanyahu for over these past couple of years, apparently saying, well, maybe I ought to be actually not so tacitly, but directly supporting Hamas as a foil against the West Bank Palestinian Authority so that we undermine their ability to fight back against Israeli expansion in the West Bank, and you see it's all the same everywhere, and something. And I guess at that point, anarchists tell you, give up on it all and don't vote. But that can't be the solution either, because there's a number of other problems that actually can be addressed more directly by staying involved and actually having your voice heard. Okay, very interesting. Other housekeeping business probably to take care of before we give it up for the weekend. One, this note from Marilyn Montgomery, who writes via email to say that my offhand dismissal of the idea of raising cattle in the middle of the ocean, i.e. on the Hawaiian Islands, I don't know. It just doesn't actually say as much, but I suppose the implication would be how backward thinking it really is to say, oh, how could you raise cattle in the middle of the ocean? So unknown. I mean, Hawaiian Islands, look, they're big enough for a cattle ranch, that's for sure. I guess my first question is, well, how do the cattle get there? But okay, we understand how that's going to happen. But an important point of historical fact, the Parker Ranch on the island of Hawaii, founded in 1847 and therefore one of the oldest ranches in the United States, predating many mainland ranches in Texas and other southwestern states where we often think of which we often think of as the basis of cattle ranching in the United States, even though I guess it isn't. But okay, well, it predates those southwestern ranches and establishment by more than 30 years, spread across approximately 130,000 acres of the island. Parker Ranch is among the nation's largest cattle ranches. So, in fact, Hawaii with a long tradition of cattle ranching, and I guess that stands to reason. I don't know that native Hawaiians would say, yeah, that's totally part of our heritage and totally awesome and we love it, or whether they would say, yeah, well, that's imperialist Americans imposing their cattle on us or what. I really don't know. I have any idea about that. But Marilyn's only point is, yeah, there's cattle ranching in Hawaii, and why don't you know about it? And the answer is, so far away. And when I think of Hawaii, I've never been there. When I think of Hawaii, I prefer, of course, to think the pleasant thoughts of the tourist in Hawaii. Well, of course, it's nothing so nitty gritty as cattle ranching. It's all pleasant beach experience, which is all the tourists would see. And perhaps now ecotourism as well, which I think would exclude the cattle ranching thing. But yes, in reality, like totally a state and everything. And it has industry and it has ranching and farming and bad crap that also happens in the rest of America as well. So, a good reminder and a good wake-up call. Second piece of housekeeping, I need to go back to something Greg asked about yesterday. And I just lost the train of thought while trying to explain things. He was asking, remember, his questions about passing a rule and there being another Republican revolt to prevent the passage of a rule of some, trivial, well, who knows? It's not trivial to the people who wanted it to pass. Some piece of legislation not on everybody's radar. But he asked also specifically about the importance of the previous question motion and how it can disrupt things and cost the majority party control of the floor. And I wasn't thinking and connecting the two, but I mean, the previous question motion, yes, it does pose problems for control of the floor generally when you are considering legislation. When you are considering a rule, the previous question motion has a special significance. It's the same significance that the previous question motion has on any piece of legislation or resolution, but when the previous question motion is defeated during the consideration of a rule for an upcoming bill, what it does is prevents debate from closing and therefore opens up the rule to amendment. by anybody. Chiefly, of course, the chief concern is the opposition to the rule, which is usually the minority party. And if they can get in coalition with some splinter faction of the majority party, they can rewrite the rule. And as you know, writing the rule very often controls the outcome of the substantive bill behind it. So it's a very dangerous thing for an organized majority anyway to lose control of the floor by losing the previous question motion on a rule, because then the minority and your rebel faction can rewrite a rule that changes the outcome of the bill. And you would prefer to just pull the bill at that point rather than lose control of the rule that governs its consideration. And that is what they did. But it's also very rare to lose the previous question motion on a rule for that reason, that usually you will instruct your rebel faction, listen, I understand that you want to sink this thing, but sink the rule, not the previous question motion. It would be better for you to vote yes on the previous question, preclude the possibility of amendment of the rule, and then vote no on the rule if you whether you hate the underlying legislation that the rule is for, or you really oppose the rule, or you just want to make trouble. The less chaotic way for you to make trouble is to vote yes on the previous question, then vote no on the rule. I would rather have a rules revolt than a previous question revolt. And in fact, I looked it up. That is what was happening. Let me see. I opened up, we went to congress.gov and just looked at yesterday's roll call votes to see what was up. And that's, the last thing that happened was or that had happened by the time that Greg was talking. Let's see, this would have been, he told me on the 11th. So the things that happened on the 10th, there was the failure of the rule for providing for consideration of the Stop Settlement Slush Funds Act, whatever that might be. Also, congressional disapproval of the rule relating to standards for determining joint employer status, and a congressional disapproval resolution for the rule relating to the waiver of the Buy America requirements for electric vehicle chargers. Okay, that's where the electric vehicle stuff came in. Anyway, they did defeat that rule, but prior to defeating the rule, there was a 100% party line vote. All the Republicans who voted joined in with the majority Republicans to adopt the previous question and therefore prevent Democrats from, or any rebel Republicans for that matter, from having an opportunity to amend the rule. So they held the line ideologically on the previous question motion. So I don't remember who it was when Greg was saying, people were asking, why don't you defeat the previous question if you oppose the rule and you want to see it changed. But I don't think, it's not clear that rebel Republicans wanted to see the rule for this bill changed. They just wanted to make trouble and register protest. So they were able to convince them, protest, but within these bounds. Stay in your First Amendment area. And they did. So there you have it. That was the update. And then I don't know. I clarified the issue for myself and for Greg. Whether that clarifies the issue for you listening, that I don't know. But in case you were listening to the show and you've been so well educated on the previous question motion, either by this show or on your own, that you said, no, wait a minute, you got that wrong, and you're preparing a long statement to that effect, I think we caught that one now. And we're back on track. Okay, so let's see. There's only just a few minutes left here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Trump had himself a day yesterday. He did, in fact, rise to give something he styled as a closing argument in his civil fraud trial in New York. This despite the long back and forth between Judge Engoron and Trump's lawyers trying to extract from him the one and only condition, which was you have to acknowledge what the rules of the court are in terms of what you can and can't argue in closing in order for you to go ahead and do this thing. And they ignored it. Not only did Chris Kise ignore all of Engoron's deadlines for agreeing, but there was also that moment in which Judge Engoron said, well, before Trump speaks, I'm going to address him directly and say, you do understand the rules and you do acknowledge that you have to follow them, right? And if so, then fine. We'll just ignore all of the deadline ignoring by Chris Kise and let this idiot go ahead anyway. So he attempted to do that. And, Trump showed up. He rose to give his closing argument. The judge started to say, so you understand. And Trump just said, blah, 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 ignored the judge entirely and went on his rant. I imagine he was pounding the gavel quite a bit, trying to get him under control. At some point, he's saying, Mr. Kise, control your client. Very, disappointing, though, once again. They were not prepared for this. He didn't know what to do. I say they give you those hammers for a reason. You whack them over the head when that happens. Now, of course, he's just encouraged to do this everywhere. As it turns out, next week, they're back in court in New York again, I think, right, for the E. Jean Carroll case, round 15. And already, Jean Carroll's lawyers are now writing to the judge there, warning him that he maybe, I don't know, I'm not certain of the gender of the judge, but warning the judge that they need to be prepared for Trump just ignoring the rules. Remember where we are in this case, and I'll just make it quick as we exit for today. And for the week, it's already been established and there's already been a finding that he did, in fact, sexually assault E. Jean Carroll and is liable for that as a result. And this phase of court proceedings is, I guess, just about the penalty phase here. And therefore, there were instructions to the Trump team. It is not permissible during this phase of the proceedings to introduce new evidence or to claim that you didn't sexually assault Ms. Carroll, or that any other sorts of things, all the things that Judge Engoron was also warning about. And to their credit this time, although we'll see whether it matters at all, the team for E. Jean Carroll, the legal team, saying to the judge, you need to be prepared for him just blowing right past all of the restrictions. Somebody's got to be ready to just drag this idiot out of court, hold him in contempt, and toss him in the clink for a while, although I think that's also maybe what he's aiming for. So there's some danger in all of this. Wow, okay, there's a million other things happening today. We even had some other weird esoteric stories to share with you over the weekend, but we're just not going to get to those. However, you are in luck if that's what you're after, because the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up after this program, as always, right here on Netroots Radio. Justice Putnam will take you on his own tour of crazy and weird stories from around the country and around the world.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, he's got all sorts of collected stories for you. Let's see. Oh, here's one. An Oregon Proud Boy pled guilty to transporting undocumented migrants in Arizona. Who would have expected that one? And the Wisconsin Supreme Court refused a request by Republican lawmakers to reconsider its rule ordering the drawing of new legislative maps. Wow, again.